Welcome to another episode of the Poultry Keepers podcast, where we talk poultry from feathers to function. In this episode, Rip, Mandolin, and John wrap up their conversation about waterfowl. So let's get right to it, shall we?
And another thing about water and ducks and geese is you can give them a clean container of water, and it seems like in a matter of minutes they can have that thing, the water out of the water and all over the floor, slung around, moved around, and make a huge mess with it.
Oh, yeah, they're dirty birds.
The one thing that I did find that worked fairly well, you can take a gallon can and get a piece of 1-inch thick lumber and cut a circle that will fit down inside that can with about 1/4 inch space on either side, and then drill a 1/2 inch hole in the center of that. That will allow them to tip that board down below the water level. They can drink, but they can't get their head in there and sling it around and make a mess with it.
So my solution was to get the flat-backed buckets and clip them on the fence outside and feed them inside. So they go inside and they eat.
Yeah.
And then to make a mess, they have to go outside. And that really saved a lot on feed. It prevented them from being able to make the food and water slurry, because that stuff will spray 6 feet in every direction. Because they very much want to take a bite and then dabble in water. Take a bite, dabble in water. And if you have your food next to your water source, it's going to get messy in a hurry.
It doesn't take long, that's for sure. It doesn't take long.
And they have wetter than... Their poops are wetter, too, because of all of their water play.
Oh, yes.
So I actually don't ever mix my waterfowl with my chickens. I keep them totally separate because that extra dampness is...
And speaking of waterfowl poop, if you ever let them free range around your house, invariably where they're going to want to go poop is on your sidewalk or your porch.
So, you think chicken poop is slippery?
Oh,
that's why there's all these sayings about goose poop. And
yeah, I keep mine in their own space where they have their own pond, their own water, and inside their coop, I've got to clean it probably 2 to 3 more times as often as I do for a chicken coop of the same size with the same number of birds, just because of that dampness.
Let's talk a little bit about nutrition for waterfowl. It's similar to chicken nutrition, but they have additional requirements for proteins and some other things. Waterfowl, for example, have a higher requirement for niacin. They need much more niacin than chickens do.
Yes,
so
they do.
They have to have that supplemented in their feed.
And they can't have medicated feed.
No, they can't have the feed with the coccidiostat in it, because the coccidiostat helps prevent coccidiosis because it binds up niacin and it's not available to the little oocysts to cause problems. So by binding up the niacin, it just really shortchanges and it can kill your ducks if you're feeding them that stuff.
Yeah, it also inhibits niacin and thiamine uptake as well, which are 2 critical amino acids for development. So don't do it.
Now, when you're growing the
there's
baby
no need
ducks,
for it ever.
Yes.
The pekin or the other large, fast-growing types, they are probably the soonest to show with a niacin deficiency because of that accelerated growth that they have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Waterfowl do grow exceptionally fast when you compare it to a chicken. They can go from a brand new baby duckling to a nearly full-grown duck in just a matter of weeks. Doesn't take them long. They have protein, a little bit higher protein requirements than chickens do, probably 20 to 22% for waterfowl overall, probably closer to 24, 26% for ducklings, which that would be far too much for chickens.
On their natural forage, they're looking for crustaceans and snails and those higher protein tidbits, and then they eat a little greens, but they're mainly after those higher protein snacks.
Another thing to remember when you're raising waterfowl is brooding them. They don't require as high temperatures as chickens do. Most chickens, they recommend starting out at 95 degrees. Ducks, you're going to be closer to 90 degrees. And they also don't need warmth as long as chickens do. We were just talking about how fast young waterfowl grow, and they can get really big on you real quick.
Yes, they will. But it is important to note that when they first hatch, they're not waterproof yet.
No.
And you don't want to encourage swimming before they start getting that oil gland activated and preening themselves to get that oil coating. Because if you take a freshly hatched duckling and put it in water, it'll start to sink because it doesn't have that oil coating to help with the buoyancy. And they can get chilled really easy. So you can give them a little splash pad so that they start preening. But I don't even worry about giving them a water play area until after 2 weeks old.
Yeah, and they can make a huge mess with that. It doesn't take them long.
But it's so fun to watch them.
Oh, I know. It's a lot of fun. I did it when we first got our cotton patch goslings. They were about 4 weeks old, and we put them in it was a gator pond over at the state fairgrounds. And we put them in there so they'd have access to that pond, which was deep. It was about 8 feet deep. And to watch those things, they would go underwater and they'd actually fly underwater with their wings. They had a ball doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But breeding waterfowl, that's a little bit different than breeding chickens, particularly if you're breeding geese. They prefer to have a long-term pair bonding, and they don't do well in a flock mating situation like you would do with regular ducks or chickens. But they usually one pair of geese, you can't get more females in there with them, most of them. Ducks, you can do a little bit more than that. And we talked about this earlier, they're going to require access to clean water for successful mating. And egg collection, it is difficult, and I'm being real generous when I say difficult, to keep waterfowl eggs clean. They can be really dirty. Waterfowl has this affinity for water and dirt and mud, and that very easily transfers to eggs that are in the nest. So you can have really grubby looking eggs in short order.
It doesn't seem to affect them much once it's hatching time.
No, surprisingly, it does not. It really does not.
When I still lived in an urban area, I had a little handful of ducks, and I was trying to make that work in an urban setting. So we built this fancy run that had a kiddie pool with a drain installed that was elevated on a gravel bed. So all I had to do was go hose off that poo, and then I had clean gravel. There was no mud. The eggs were spotless. But what I didn't account for is every time I hosed off that gravel, all that poo and water just sunk. And that next season, ooh, thank you. We had to make the whole thing.
Yeah, sink and sink.
The fly breeding going on and that moisture as it had built up from the season before. Yeah, it was a great idea for about a month.
You need a rotating paddock design if you're going to do this. There's a lot of things to consider about
there's so much
things clean and sanitary. You were talking about growth rates, Rip, though, and these are pretty amazing critters. And the way that
they can be well managed.
We're looking at a feed conversion ratio like anywhere from 2.5 to 3 is not too shabby.
It's incredible when you stop and think about it. It really is.
I mean, it's,
one thing we haven't
heritage poultry. I hope to get a 5-to-1. It's more like 4-to-1 in my record. So if a good way to put on a lot of meat fast is waterfowl, but your infrastructure needs to be able to support it.
One thing we haven't talked about is health of waterfowl, and by and large, they're pretty healthy.
Yeah, they're pretty resilient. There's not much that phases them.
You got, particularly with some of the bigger, heavier breeds, you got to watch for leg problems. Respiratory infections are another common thing. Parasite issues can be another one. I'm going to get on my soapbox here for just a minute. There is a problem in waterfowl called angel wing. And what angel wing is, it's where the last joint of the wing, those feathers grow so fast that they cannot support them. So that flops out. The bottom of the wing drops out or turns outside. this is not, I repeat, this is not the same thing as a split wing. Chickens have split wings. Waterfowl have angel wings. But I don't know why folks started calling split wings and chicken angel wing, but it's not the same thing. There is a lot of evidence that suggests that angel wing in waterfowl is caused by high levels of protein in their diet because it grows so fast. I am of the opinion that there has to be a genetic propensity or tendency for those birds to get angel wing, but the nutrition and diet is definitely a contributing factor to that. And I haven't posted it yet, but I'm going to be posting an article here in the next few days. It's in this week's rotation on angel wing and what you can do about it. But it's basically just, these things are growing so fast, and you got to watch their protein uptake. Don't go too crazy like we do with chickens sometimes. We talked about temperament.
What about their flight ability? I know heavy ducks and heavy geese, they can't fly, not for any distance, but the smaller they get, the more likely it is that they actually can take off and fly. Call ducks can fly, can't they?
You can fly like a quail.
Mine were, what do they call that, pinioned?
That's another good thing to talk about. But even geese, some breeds of geese are exceptional flyers. Those cotton patch geese we got when we took them out of where we had been brooding them, and they were up pretty much adult size and were just feathering in. We put them in just an open pasture-like environment thing there at the museum, and one of them immediately took off and flew completely out of sight, never to be seen again.
Nature finds a way.
And they were bigger than a duck, for sure. They were good size. Even large ducks, Muscovies, they're pretty good flyers too.
I was told by a Muscovy breeder that if you have hens at 1 year old that can still fly, they're a cull because they're not heavy enough. If they're good
Makes sense.
quality, they can't fly after a year old because they've got weight to hold them down.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Several years ago, a friend of mine found a Canada goose left abandoned in a parking lot in a big mall area, just one little gosling. And she asked what she should do with it. And I was like, ideally, it gets raised with other geese and transition back to a wild lifestyle. She was like, I can't do that. But I had a batch of babies the same age, so I took it. And she grew up, hit flight age. And when they would take off running across the field, she gained her first flight, and she probably got 30, 40 foot up in the air. And I was watching her, and I saw her head looking down going, holy crap. And then she crash landed right into the fence.
That's an acquired skill. Well,
I enjoy watching parents teach their goslings to fly out on the pond across from us. It's pretty neat the way they flap just over the water and they splash the water with their wings. And they'll just do that 2 or 3 times with the goslings in a little group watching. Well, they're just showing them, hey, this is how we do it. This is how we do it. And then a couple days later, they're off.
Madeline, you were talking about crash landing. And I think most of us are probably familiar with that old quote that any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. And I saw a picture that illustrated it perfectly. It had that quote on it, but what the picture was, you could see 2 skid lines. It was light snow, through the snow across the top of the frozen lake. And they came to a stop, and you saw these little goose feet walking away from it.
Yeah. That happens in the spring when the migratory waterfowl come back and we haven't iced out yet. It's pretty funny.
That gave me a chuckle when I saw that. But if you're interested in getting started with waterfowl, it's the same way as getting started in chickens. Find someone who can mentor you. You will do much, much better with that help. Also, if you can locate someone that you want to get a start from, that's a good person to ask to mentor you. And finding good waterfowl is the same techniques, the same thing as involved in finding good chickens. So if you have the space, And if you feel like you're up to the management task and you want some waterfowl, by all means, get some and give it a try. They are a lot of fun.
They have a smartness to them that's
Yes.
pretty neat
Ooh,
too. There's been
Yeah.
a couple of times over the years where people reached out to me to see if I would take their one duck. And these are people who didn't have chickens. They were not prepared. And this poor little duck had to grow up with dogs. It's happened 2 or 3 times now, but 2 times stand out in my mind. One duck, she thought she was a poodle. The other duck, she thought she was a German Shepherd. And I had German Shepherds, and bringing those ducks home, they were separate from each other, and introducing them to my ducks. I first started by letting them meet my dogs because my dogs are responsible and they could handle being around a new bird. And then I would let my ducks out. And the look that they got on their face when they saw ducks getting in the pool and playing for the first time, they hung with my dogs for a week. But at the end of that week, both of them figured out the exact same time after a full week, you know what? I might actually be a duck. Oh my goodness.
And they are smart, and particularly geese. I have seen our cotton patch geese over there at the museum. They would encounter something that was a little strange or they weren't sure of, and they would stop and they would stare at it, and they would tilt their head to one side and then to the other. And I wonder if this is something that I could maybe put to good use, or I could eat it, or whatever it is. And you can just almost see the gears turning inside their head.
Yeah, you can see those little gears turning. And because of that, I would highly suggest against raising one. Just if you're going to do it, get a flock, get at least 3.
They're just like chickens. They're flock animals, and they do better in that environment.
So this Easter, if someone gives you one duck, either find a flock for it or go get another. Don't torture them and make them think they're dogs.
Yeah, it's not too good when they chase cars.
Well, that's been my experience down in Memphis. Every public park seems to have a flock of feral waterfowl.
Oh, they're not feral. They're dumped. Those are people doing the exact opposite of finding them responsible homes. They're taking domestic animals and putting them in a wild situation that they are not prepared for.
Yeah, so they're chasing you through the Kroger parking lot. First, they back up traffic because they come across the street from behind the park and back up traffic in both directions for about 5 minutes. And then they chase people around the Kroger parking lot.
We've got that problem here in where I live in Lakeland, Florida.
Except it's Publix, right? That's the only difference.
We have one lake called Lake Mirror, and all the dump ducks wind up there. There's ducks and geese and swans. Now, the swans were the only birds that were brought in legitimately, and they were a gift from Queen Elizabeth. Sent 6 pairs of mute swans over here. I don't know how many swans they've raised over the years, but now they got the mute swans, the black neck swans, the black swans. But it's the place to go and hang out with waterfowl if you're interested. Real popular with little kids.
If I want to fill in the southern leg of my Sibley's Birds East book, I'll know a stop.
There you go.
Bring my binoculars.
Guys, that's all that I have to go over. Anything that you guys have, or you have a question maybe I could answer? I don't know.
I feel like we covered quite a bit, and my only parting words is think long and hard if you want to double your chore load by having ducks.
Yeah.
They are more than what a chicken needs.
Keeping ducks is not just all ducky, and I'll just leave it at that.
And if they're going to be
sharing, if you like entertaining birds, they are definitely entertaining.
They're great. They have wonderful personalities. They really do.
Yeah, and don't share waterfront property with domestic and native waterfowl because they don't mix when you start mixing all the
this is true.
Vectors together.
Thankfully, we don't have a pond or anything to encourage wild visits. At most, we might get a blue heron back in the creek, but they stay outside of our fence. Because especially with the AI concerns float around with the avian influenza, that's largely being transported around by wild waterfowl.
Right.
Yes.
So you don't want them hanging out in your yard if they're wild, and keep your domestics separate for sure.
Absolutely.
And that's a genuine. Be precautious and be safe. But they're delicious. Raise them if you can.
Absolutely.
They taste
A lot of
better
fun.
if they remain.
Okay, Rip, sign us out.
All right, everybody, we've had a lot of fun today, and we hope you have too. We'll be back with you every Tuesday, bright and early at 12 a.m. in the morning. So if you're up early, catch us then. But until then, you guys keep having fun and keep raising your birds, and above all, keep enjoying your birds. Happy poultry keeping, everybody.